at offices. Thank you so much for your feedback this afternoon. Thank you, Mary Margaret Slack and Ben Thomas. Wonderful to have you on the program.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei. When going up is a real downer. 162 community COVID cases today and the peak's not expected for some weeks. But here's the good news. Waikato gets a few more freedoms from 11:59pm tomorrow night. Aucklanders have to wait at least another week to see whether they can head to the mall, museum, pool or library as well. Businesses have been going 12 long rounds with COVID and for some it's landed the knockout blow. The COVID response minister is live and we hit the streets in Waikato and Auckland to see what you think. The New Zealand tech that could test your COVID immunity in just 15 minutes. Doggone it, what a great day for canines to ride the Wellington cable car.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Marama Tipole. Aucklanders will have to live with their current COVID restrictions for at least 8 more days. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says Cabinet has decided in principle to move Auckland to Alert Level 3 Step 2 at 11:59pm next Tuesday. It means shops, museums and libraries in Auckland can reopen with mask wearing and social distancing, and the outdoor gathering limit will be increased to 25.
These decisions are carefully balanced and allow us to release some of the pressure and fatigue that we know exists in Auckland while we continue to vaccinate and prepare for the new framework where much more certainty will exist for everyone.
Auckland's Mayor Phil Goff has welcomed the decision, saying that given the high vaccination rate, an easing of restrictions makes sense. Meanwhile, Waikato can move to Alert Level 3, Step 2, at midnight tomorrow, and the Waikato District Mayor is over the moon about it. Alan Sanson says the announcement is the boost people need as levels of compliance are beginning to drop.
We've been in this a month now and we're in the same position we were a month ago, so people are not seeing any benefit for the hard work that they've done in relation to what they've had to put up with.
Alan Sanson says the decision will mean the world to retail businesses, especially leading up to Christmas. Meanwhile, Auckland continues to bear the brunt of the Delta outbreak, registering 156 of today's record number of 162 new community cases. There are 5 new cases in Waikato and 1 in Northland, but none in Christchurch. All of the 53 people in hospital are in the Auckland region. There are now 2 positive cases among staff at the Edmonton Meadows Care Home in Henderson, alongside 8 residents, 2 of whom are in North Shore Hospital. Government modelling suggests there could be 1,400 COVID cases a week by the end of the month. That would mean 150 new hospitalisations a week, with 11 of these patients requiring intensive care. Director General of Health Ashley Bloomfield says ICUs would not be overwhelmed with those numbers.
And we talked about this with the Chief Executive from ADHB, Auckland DHB this morning, that actually they feel even in that scenario, which was the sort of the higher projection scenario, the upper projection scenario, that the hospital facilities in Auckland, including ICUs, would be able to manage.
The modelling was compiled by the Northern Region Health Coordination Centre. Dozens of people have turned out for a shot of COVID-19 vaccine on the first day of a Southland Farmgate Vaccination Tour. 2 teams of vaccinators in caravans are visiting 24 settlements over the next 5 days. Southland Mayor Gary Tong, who's on the tour, says he's particularly heartened by the number of young people showing up for their first dose.
Whether it was 1 or 100 that we saw today, it was progress, but I'm really stoked with the progress that we're having. Like there's a line up here now, people waiting, so it's great.
The tour continues tomorrow with stops in 4 more rural locations. A witness of a large fire at the Christchurch wastewater treatment plant this afternoon says it was awe-inspiring to see the landmark building collapsing. The City Council says the fire, which sent thick black smoke over the city, is believed to have started on the roof and spread. Witness Jason Lopez says there's still a burnt rubber smell, even though he's now 5 kilometres away from the site.
This black smoke coming off what seemed to be coming from the sewage processing thing. Saw some big flames, ambulances arriving, police, etc. And then the dome of the sewage processing building collapsed in front of me.
Residents living downwind of the scene are advised to keep doors and windows closed. It's 4 minutes past 5. Coach Gary Stead is singling out the Black Caps bowlers for special praise after the team's important win over India at cricket's T20 World Cup in the UAE. The New Zealanders reignited their semi-final hopes with a comprehensive 8-wicket win this morning. The Black Caps restricted India's powerful batting to just 110, which Stead says is no mean feat.
Up there with the best performance I've seen in my time with a T20 bowling team. To restrict, a star-studded team like India to 110 was really, really special.
New Zealand can now reach the semis with wins over Scotland, Namibia and Afghanistan, starting with Scotland on Wednesday night. The Black Ferns Sevens Olympic gold medal winning captain Sarah Hirini has signed with Hurricanes women's team for next year's inaugural Super Rugby Aupiki competition. Hirini, who is from Manawatu, says it's a huge honour to play for the region she grew up in and the Super Rugby side she supports. The Hurricanes' full women's squad and the team's draw will be announced in the coming days. An Argentine soccer coach has been shot and players fled the pitch as Huracán Los Heros fans fought among themselves during a third-tier match in Mendoza province. Videos show players from Huracán and opponents Ferro de General Pico running for cover and fans hiding behind walls. Ferro coach Mauricio Romero was reportedly treated for a gunshot wound to the shoulder. That's the news.
Batting off COVID criticism.
There is not a moment that I am not thinking about how I can bring life back safely for Auckland. Not a moment.
The Black Caps batter India.
One of the best performances New Zealand have put on in T20 cricket for quite some time.
And the bat dethrones our favourite birds.
The winner of the 17th annual Bird of the Year is the long-tailed bat.
Come on. It's all bats, really, isn't it? Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Long, fine spells, strong southeasterlies tomorrow night. Gisborne to Wairarapa, partly cloudy and isolated showers. Rain in Gisborne tomorrow evening. Central High Country and Whanganui to Wellington, cloud breaking up this afternoon, but showers linger about the ranges. A few afternoon showers tomorrow persisting in Wellington with strong southeasterlies. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury fine. Cloud increasing tomorrow with showers from late morning. Buller to Fiordland, a few showers clearing to fine south of Westport tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland expect cloudy periods, a few showers about coastal Southland, spreading elsewhere this evening and clearing tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, partly cloudy with the odd shower, fine apart from evening showers tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā, e ho tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Auckland Retail should be able to fling open the doors next week if Cabinet gives the final sign-off. The Prime Minister says the high vaccination rates in the city means the risk of spread in shops is low risk. Waikato will drop down to the same level tomorrow. The COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, joins me now. Tēnā koe, Minister.
Tēnā koe.
Why are you making Auckland wait until next week to see if they go to that next step, step 2? Why not just go there now?
Oh, look, I think we're giving Auckland a reasonable amount of certainty that they'll go there. Obviously, the case numbers are growing in Auckland, and we've still got a little bit to run on that. But we want to be able to give Auckland a date. The Director General's advice at Cabinet this morning was not to move immediately. And after further discussion, the Cabinet made the decision that we wanted to signal to Auckland that they will move from next week.
But if you are using the measure of pressure on the health system, which you've indicated that you are, to inform some of the decision-making, there's only 53 people in hospital and only 3 in ICU. So given that evidence, we could go now, couldn't we?
Well, that's certainly one of the things that gave the Cabinet confidence to move next week. One of the things that we've still got to see flow through is what the impact of secondary schools reopening is, so we can work our way through that. But yes, we are feeling more confident, and that is one of the reasons that we've signalled that we want to move from next week.
So this would be Alert Level 3, Step 2, as it's called. Can you just clarify a couple of the scenarios that would be allowed? So gatherings outside, 25 people, you could have, a mix of 24 bubbles outside of your own, if we go to that step, in your backyard?
It's a gathering size of 25. We encourage people, obviously, not to have huge amounts of bubble mixing, but it is safer to be outside. We've not picked up cases from people gathering outside since we introduced the 10 limit requirement for gatherings outside. So it is now, I think it is now safer for people to get together in bigger groups.
But the letter of the rules means that I could have people from 24 other bubbles as long as I don't exceed 25 outside under that step 2.
Well, I would encourage people to use judgment, but yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then also it allows people to mix at museums, right, libraries and swimming pools. Now, that's regardless of vaccination status. So why then couldn't I have 2 vaccinated people over for an inside dinner?
Ultimately, what we've looked at is what are the low-risk settings. Having someone over from dinner actually is one of the places where COVID-19 has been spreading. It hasn't been spreading in those public places, and this is not. We don't just look at New Zealand evidence. We look at trends around the world as well. Those big open public spaces, even if they're indoors, are lower risk than in a domestic setting.
So malls, will people be able to go to malls at step 2, say in the Waikato next week, use the toilets, all be inside at the same time moving around? That's allowed too?
Inside, they'll have to follow the PPE requirements, so they'll need to be wearing a face covering and so on, and they'll need to be scanning their QR codes, but yes, they will be able to move around within a shopping mall.
And use the toilets as well?
And use the toilets as well.
Can you not see that seems a little inconsistent to people, given the restrictions on their own home environment?
It's a pragmatic set of decisions based on the public health information we've got about where the greatest risk is. So we're seeing the greatest risk in those indoor social gatherings, in people's homes. They tend to have been the places where COVID-19 has been spreading, not so much the bigger spaces, such as shopping malls, or definitely not so much outdoors.
But then in those scenarios, Minister, the retailers and in fact anyone in those scenarios can't control whether they're allowing vaccinated or unvaccinated people in, because there's no vaccine passport at the moment. People can control who comes into their own home, so they could just invite vaccinated people.
Well, but of course there'll be no way to enforce that.
Right, but there's also, how are you going to enforce the rules in malls, for example?
Well, the malls will be open, so the key thing will be around people wearing face masks, people following the social distancing guidelines and so forth.
But who polices that, Minister?
Well, ultimately we found generally in those big public spaces there's a good degree of peer pressure involved, and that people generally have been following the rules pretty closely.
At what point will the government decide that people have had enough time to get vaccinated?
We're expecting to hit that 90% marker in Auckland this week, so we've just got the county's Mako DHB to get their numbers up to the 90 marker for first doses, and then that then gives about a sort of 3 to 4 week period after that for people to get their second doses, and then I think that's a reasonable period of time. Now that's why we've aligned the cabinet check-in at the end of November, so that we can just take stock of all of that and then make further decisions from there.
So can I take that to mean if we're not at 90% double dosed in Auckland by the 29th of November, you're going to call time and say, well, you've had a reasonable amount of time to get vaccinated and we will move on without you?
Well, I'm not making that pronouncement today, but what I am indicating.
But is that the direction you're headed in, Minister?
What I'm indicating is that we didn't choose the end of November completely, out of nothing. We chose that date because we thought that would align with what would be a reasonable amount of time for Auckland DHBs to get to 90%.
When will vaccinated Aucklanders know if and when they can travel outside of the region? Can you give us a date for that?
I can't give you a date for that yet either. Part of that, of course, depends what happens around the rest of the country. But we're keeping that under a very close review, and we're mindful of the fact that, people want to be able to get together for the summer and for Christmas and for New Year. And so, we are very mindful of that.
And we're running out of time, Minister, but will you be able to tell us that on the 29th of November, when we'll be able to leave Auckland?
Oh, I think we'll have a lot more clarity by the end of the month, absolutely.
Are primary schools going to be going back before the end of the year?
We've given a tentative date of the 15th of November. That's what we're tracking towards at the moment. We've been working with the education sector towards that for primary schools to be coming back, even if not all on site at the same time.
So have you got all the advice you asked for, Minister? Have you got it back?
Not all of it, but that's what we've asked the sector to work towards, and we'll be getting further advice on that over the next week.
Can you give me a date for the launch of the vaccination certificate?
We're a couple of weeks away from that, so see some people coming in to be doing the trial phase to make sure the system's all robust. That'll happen over the next week or two, and then we'll be ready to roll out from the middle of the month.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's the COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins. It is 5:15 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. E haere ake nei, we're on the streets of the Waikato asking what they think of the decision. So it's another week and a bit and pending final cabinet sign-off until restrictions ease a bit in Auckland. Our reporter Louise Denny joins me now from Onehunga. Louise, what are people telling you about the decision? What do they make of it?
Well, there has been some mixed reaction here on the streets in Onehunga. Some people are a bit fearful after today's record cases, and others are just happy for a bit of relief. We're in week 11 of lockdown here in Auckland. Here's what some of them had to say just shortly after that announcement.
I heard there's still a lot of cases still. It must be better stay off.
You reckon we should have stayed if there's so many cases?
Yeah.
We're sort of expecting it, I think, next week, so it's good thing.
Welcoming.
Finally, yeah, good.
Yeah, what will it change for you?
Just retail, I think, just being able to move around and go into shops and do normal stuff like that. That's what everyone's sort of missing, getting out. And
it's been a long time coming, to be honest. We're struggling at the moment, and we wanted to move quick so we can move on, and yeah, basically we want it to happen sooner than later.
The thing is, protecting the people is more important to us, protecting us from the virus.
I'm surprised because the cases have gone higher than before, but it's good because everyone's bored at home.
Yeah, in all honesty, personally, I think it's a waste of time. The reason why I say that is because, although we have all these restrictions and moving from level to level, but there's still people out there bursting bubbles and not complying to the rules. So, no matter how much rules we try and put up, everybody's just rebellious enough to break it.
And Louise, we've got some new names and kind of competing systems. So it's level 3, step 2, eventually, if we get there in Auckland. What can we do at step 2?
Yes, it is a bit confusing. So phase 2 of level 3 means that public facilities are back. So that's your museums, zoos, and of course when those are back open, it means that we do still have to be social distance and masks are still mandatory, but also we can up the number of people that we have at our picnics and exercise classes to 25, and there's no limit on the number of households that can be involved in that. But again, social distancing is required and so are those masks. But of course retail is back again, and they've had 11 weeks off, so they've got a week to prepare and then they reopen on Tuesday. And based on the few businesses that we've spoken to, they are thankful for a bit of relief, but a week is going to be all hands on deck for them. And when they do reopen, it will be the same deal, so 2 metres apart and masks are mandatory. But they are thankful that with the festive season coming up, it might be a bit of reprieve after 11 weeks off. And it also might take the pressure off some of our posties. As we've heard, NZ Post has had to hire hundreds of workers and there's no vans left in the city, so it could be a bit of help for them as well.
Thanks, Louise. Louise Denny there live from Onehunga. Homai o whakaaro. Let us know your feedback. Nō reira anei ngā kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. So, level 3, step 2, Auckland potentially gets signed off next week. What do you think of the decision? It will mean that you can go to the mall, you can go to the shops, you can go to the museum and library and the pools if and when it happens, but you won't be able to have people inside your house for a meal and not allowed to use your loo even. So, what do you make of the decision? Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Also interested in what you think about the fact you will be able to go to the mall and the shops, but primary kids won't be back at school. A mainstay of Takapuna's cafe scene has closed its doors for the final time, due in large part to Auckland's COVID-19 restrictions. It's a tale of woe shared by many on Hurstmere Road, where restrictions coupled with roadworks have driven some businesses to breaking point. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe took a stroll down Struggle Street.
Yesterday was our last day that we served to customers, so there were a few tears on my way driving to work yesterday morning just because it's like finished, you know.
Hayley Eisted is effectively jobless, her position managing Ragazzi Cafe consumed by the pandemic. A mainstay of Takapuna shutting its doors for good, in large part due to restrictions that continue to cripple local businesses.
I have a cafe managing job at the Glenfell Mall, but I can't start it until the mall opens. So as of yesterday, I'm unemployed until the mall opens, or I'm just going to have to look for something else.
So after 6 years, her days of welcoming customers through the front doors are over. She's sweeping today instead of serving. The cafe sits empty and gutted, its tables and chairs nowhere to be seen. Other wares sold off online. Staff told they're no longer needed.
The chef, he's just managed to get a job, but again, he can't start till the traffic light moves or the levels drop. So at the moment, yeah, we're all unemployed.
If there was ever a street that embodied the cost of COVID and government restrictions, Hurstmere Road is it. The businesses here are hurting as is, already in the ring with disruptive roadworks, but it's COVID that's landed the knockout blow for some.
It's just impossible. We have no direction, so.
Some, like Leaf and Loaf cafe owner Stuart Wright, are fighting on, but struggling to see light at the end of the tunnel.
The system that we had with level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, that was very well communicated. We knew exactly where we were. We knew exactly what we had to do. Now we've got level 2.94, 2.73. You know, we've got all these different levels within levels, and it's just confusing and nobody knows what's going on.
Even when Auckland does reach the traffic lights, he won't open properly until the green signal flashes up.
I personally don't want to, and I don't want my staff also policing policing passports, no passports, because it's just going to create friction. It's just going to create people getting angry with my staff. I don't want that. So we'll stay exactly where we are. Everybody is social distance, everybody is contactless. You cannot come in here until that system is changed and we've got freedom where we can all come and go as we please.
Now, it's not all doom and gloom, with some saying Uber Eats is filling the void.
We only have probably 4-8 seatings at the back, and everything's just like takeaways.
But the vast majority of businesses spoken to by Checkpoint say they're desperate for more freedom. Takapuna Beach Business Association Chief Executive Terence Harper calls the situation dire.
There's really been some heartbreaking stories around people that have put their life savings into their businesses and then they've had to close. They've got their homes on the line, they've got everything that they have worked for on the line, and they're having to close because they can't trade. Last Thursday I saw a very sad thing, a well-known cafe in Takapuna closing its doors for the last time. The owners physically lifting the furniture, crockery, chairs out into a moving truck to auction off. They've closed, they're not going to reopen again. That's very sad when you're seeing those personal stories. It really brings it home.
Joe Gio opened Joe's Eatery 6 months before COVID hit the country.
I've been here for about 6 months before COVID hit us. And I don't come from a hospitality background, I come from a corporate background. And so I'm doing something like this for the first time in my life. So every day is a significant learning curve for me.
Significant and a real struggle.
I'm struggling. At various levels. Of course, financially, of course, it is. I think it's the same story for everyone.
Day 76 in lockdown. Day 76 on Struggle Street, where instead of open, the signs say for lease.
It's 24 minutes past 5, and if you were listening to that story on radio, we'll put that piece from our two Nicks up on our Facebook page, and you can check out the video. Kia amo tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. There have been emotional reunions at Sydney Airport with people able to travel home quarantine-free for the first time in 20 months. Hotel quarantine and the cap on arrivals have been scrapped for fully vaccinated travellers. World Watch's Paulina Lau has more.
Travellers greeted by cheers and cameras as they came through the arrival gates. Tearful and emotional scenes at Sydney Airport today with passengers who have been stranded overseas. Young couples arriving for friends' weddings, parents reuniting with children, people meeting new babies. Sydney International Airport has been bustling today.
I'm ecstatic. Like when we touched down this morning, it was just the energy on the plane was insane. It's so good to be back.
Feels great. I just even like walking through and hearing people speak with the Australian accent, it's just good to be back home.
14 international flights are expected to land in Sydney today, among them a flight from Singapore and the first Qantas flight from Los Angeles in more than 18 months.
Qantas Dreamliner taking the first passengers from LAX to Australia today. Look at this. She's going to be departing to Sydney, Australia for the first passenger.
But while this is a welcomed move, it's been a long and hard journey for some.
It's been really, really hard, and especially since my mum's actually sick, so I'm actually going to be heading straight to the hospital. So this was an impossible flight to get on, and I'm so relieved.
For others, Sydney isn't the final destination, with passengers hoping to get into other states to see family members.
I'm really scared and emotional because I really want to see my mum, because the doctor said that she hasn't got long, and I'm going to do whatever I can today to see her. I mean, I can't see her today, obviously that's not the law, but I've got to do whatever I can.
From today, fully vaccinated travellers can also leave the country. There are still restrictions. Passengers need a PCR test and evidence of vaccination. If travelling to the UK, US, Canada, Italy, Greece, Germany or South Africa, Australians won't have to quarantine upon arrival, and ticket sales are reportedly at record levels. New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet says November could not start in a more positive way. With an election looming, the government will be working on rebuilding public trust that's been eroded after almost 2 years of uncertainty with closed borders and stranded citizens.
There's a massive fire at a Christchurch wastewater treatment plant that has sent a huge plume of smoke into the air. It's in Bromley, about 7 k's east of the city, but the smoke can be seen from the CBD. Our reporter Conan Young joins me now from Bromley. Conan, what's it looking like out there?
Yeah, look, so it's actually a lot better, believe it or not, than what it was about a couple of hours ago. As we were driving here towards, this is the main sewage treatment plant for the entire city of Christchurch, we could see these massive plumes of black smoke, a good 7 kilometres away. And we didn't know at that stage what it was that was on fire, but as we got closer, it soon became apparent. The two massive plastic domes that cover the sewage treatment plants, the one caught on fire, and then the second one caught on on fire. These have completely collapsed inside these huge tanks which contain, which is where the sewage gets treated. And look, the firefighters, there's been 8 fire engines have been on the scene here since just after 3 o'clock, working hard to get this under control. For those who can't see this, we've got a ladder with a firefighter on the end of it, and he's right in the thick of this smoke, just pouring, I'm assuming it's water on this fire. I spoke to one of the officers in charge here, one of the firefighters, and he said that the main aim at the moment is to suppress this fire but not damage the sewage treatment plant too much. They've had to evacuate all of the staff from here, but it is still working at a limited capacity, but they're now facing this conundrum of how do we get this out and still leave it up and running so that everybody can keep flushing their toilets in Christchurch.
As you say, Conan, it's a massive extension ladder behind you that we can see and lots of billowing smoke. And in those pictures, it almost looked like the black clouds of smoke were painted on the sky. They're so distinctive. And what advice, given everything that's billowing out of there, what's the advice to locals?
Yeah, the DHB put out a warning for anybody with a heart or a lung condition, young children or elderly, to stay indoors if they could smell smoke around their homes. We popped down the road, not too far away from here actually, there's a lot of homes. I spoke to a few residents. There's one woman with young children, she was in an older weatherboard house. She said, look, they've had their doors and windows closed since just after 3 o'clock, but the smoke is still getting in. And this smoke, it's not like a forest fire, it smells like a tyre fire. It's the most acrid, awful smell. It really gets caught in the back of your throat. It has eased off now though. They do look like they're getting it under control, but like I say, the firefighters here just trying to work out how they can get this finally out without totally damaging the sewage treatment plant.
Thanks, Conan. A dual purpose for your COVID mask. You might have to chuck it on there to protect you from that billowing smoke. That's Conan Young, who was joining me from Bromley by that sewage treatment, wastewater treatment plant that is on fire. Hey, a lot of you have been getting in touch about level 3, step 2. It is a bit confusing. One of the primary questions you're asking is, can we get a haircut? I am so across this. No, you can't. I tell you that after having a couple of hacks at my own fringe with some nail scissors. No, you can't get a haircut until you get to step 3, because that is considered close quarters hairdressers. So you have to wait a bit longer for that. Someone else is asking, what about restaurants? Are they included in retail? Sarah, the deal is this. Cafes and food courts within businesses, retail businesses, can operate, but you can't sit there and have a cuppa and your eggs on toast or whatever. It's takeaway service only. So no return to inside cafes just yet. You have to wait for the step down to level 3. And then someone else is saying, I can go to the mall, but I can't reinstate my driver's licence. Preposterous. Sorry, can't clarify the one on driver's licence. Not sure. It is not on the list. Someone else says, schools, why aren't all high school kids going back? 15th of November, does that include intermediate? So many unanswered questions, still no certainty. Another 8 days of this, you're right, and Cabinet has another look at it then and signs it off. Christmas, they need to answer this. Unfair that they are not giving us this. Kia ora e te iwi e haere ake nei e au checkpoint. A few weeks on from being crowned one of our least COVID vaccinated towns, we're back in Murupara, where natural doesn't always mean safe, calls for greater regulation of some supplements, and the Auckland businesses taking a pounding from COVID. Homai o Whakaaro would love your feedback about anything on the program today, but do let us know your thoughts on the step changes, as they're called. Waikato goes to alert level 3, step 2 from 11:59 tomorrow night. Auckland has to wait another week, but looks like it's headed in the same direction. What do you make of it? Text me on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Haftai lava, thank you, Lisa. The government says it's waiting an extra week to lower the alert levels in Auckland to see the impact of opening secondary schools in the region. It announced this afternoon an in-principle decision to drop the city to alert level 3, step 2 from 11:59pm next Tuesday. The relaxation means shops, museums and libraries in Auckland can reopen with mask wearing and social distancing. The COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, told Checkpoint the low numbers in hospital had helped give the Cabinet confidence to lower the level, but they just wanted to see what happens restrictions with the schools reopening. Waikato will drop to Alert Level 3, Step 2 from tomorrow. The decision has been welcomed by local politicians. The Auckland Mayor Phil Goff says given the high vaccination rates, an easing of restrictions makes sense as long as people follow the rules. And the Waikato District Mayor Alan Sanson says the announcement is the boost people need as levels of compliance are beginning to drop. He says the decision will help retail businesses, especially leading up to Christmas. The Director General of Health says the hospital system appears confident it can deal with a potential 1,400 COVID cases a week. Government modelling suggests there could be as many as 200 cases a day by the end of the month, meaning 150 new hospitalisations a week, with 11 of those patients requiring intensive care. Ashley Bloomfield says officials believe the system would not be overwhelmed with those numbers. There were a record 162 new community cases today, 156 of those in Auckland. And a health warning has been issued for Christchurch residents following a fire at a wastewater treatment plant. Winds are sending smoke in the direction of Christchurch's eastern suburbs and central city. An eyewitness, Jason Lopez, says there's still a burnt rubber smell, even though he's now 5 kilometres away from the site. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Thanks, Marama. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa nai nei. Ko Nona Peltier, who's here to talk business. Let's start with Westpac, Nona. So profits up for that bank by more than 2/3. What's that down to? Home loans?
Well, yes, partly home loans, but also look strong momentum in the economy overall. The company said that their interest rate margins improved. Their bad debts provisions fell quite, markedly. So in other words, that was boosted, for example, by $84 million. So in the end, their net profit rose 69% to $931 million, and that was in the year to September. So part of that was because they had fewer bad debts than they expected, and also the mortgage book grew by 10%. Customer deposits, they rose 7%. So, overall, the bank certainly has done well. Not well enough, though. The market was not thrilled with the result because the outlook is a bit uncertain with the continued lockdowns and so forth, and making it difficult for businesses. So overall, it's an uncertain future for the bank and for, I guess, all banks and the economy.
No, can you explain this conundrum to me next, which is making room for a third big supermarket chain would apparently force up grocery prices. Says who? Because that seems to be counterintuitive.
You'd think, right? Well, the Commerce Commission, as you've heard previously, has been holding a series of seminars, and they're kind of near wrapping up. One of the ones they were talking about today was talking about whether the wholesale market should be reformed and whether the two big operators should be broken up and divest their stores. Well, that prompted a reaction from the two big ones, Foodstuffs and Woolworths, who are at the center of this review, saying that if you make us close down our operations or any of them, you're going to interfere with our structure. That's going to, be difficult for us to keep our what they call vertical integration. It will increase costs, which consumers will have to pay. And they're saying that, look, there's enough competition in the market. There's no need for divestment. That's an extreme, drastic, and unwarranted, and would damage New Zealand's reputation as a place to invest if you force them to sell down some of their assets. They say they would be cherry-picked into the big cities and would do nothing really to help the smaller regional areas with their issues.
And Nona, what numbers do you bring from the markets?
Look, the top 50 index, it was down 0.5%, nearly 70 points to 13,030. And the New Zealand dollar, it's trading at 71.7 US cents, which is really little change from where we were at Friday, 95.5 Australian and 52.4 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier there with business news. The small Bay of Plenty town, Murupara, has seen vaccination rates climb in the last few weeks, despite battling misinformation in the community. When vaccine data was first released, the town had the lowest uptake nationwide, with 32% having had the first dose. According to the most recent data, that's up to 44%, but it's still just half the nationwide vaccine rate, which now sits at 88% single-dosed. One One of the people helping to get the message out about the vaccine is Murupara Community Board Chair, ko taku manuhiri in nei, ko Jackie Te Amo. Tēnā koe, Jackie.
Tēnā koe, kia ora koutou.
How are you battling the misinformation out there?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. As you may or may not know, we have a iwi leader inside our ward, and that's actually not helping. But we also have a doctor who has his own view also inside that, who services a lot of our communities, and so inside that there's a lot of respect for the doctor's view. But both are of the opinion that what they're actually requesting is actually education around what actually goes into the vaccine. And as you know, we didn't have, leading up to the rollout, we didn't have much information around it, and I think that's where these views are coming from.
So, Jackie, to be clear, do you have an iwi leader there and a doctor who you would, who you feel are putting misinformation into the community?
I don't believe it's misinformation. I believe it's not helping in terms of us actually trying to get people vaccinated. So what they're requesting is education around it, around the vaccine.
So have you been able to answer people's questions?
No, I was hoping that they would have health experts who would come out. I was hoping that when they're actually rolling these things out, that there are people that they can talk to. But you know, because it's not actually mandatory. That there's people, and there are people inside the ward that are still wanting information around it.
So what do you need? What do you need to deliver that information to them? You mentioned that, you'd hope there'd be some people who'd come along for a conversation about it, who could supply that information. Who would be the right person to come into your community and give that information and answer questions that people would respect and listen to?
Well, I was hoping, and this is just my own thoughts, I haven't actually ran this by anyone, but I was actually hoping to have a forum where you could have our doctor up there as well as an iwi leader, as well as experts who know a lot about the vaccine, and even just a normal local person inside there, and have a debate about these kind of things, like why they're thinking the way they're thinking, why, and just talk these things out in front of everyone inside the community. I thought that would be cool.
How's it kind of playing out in the community, Jackie? Is there any tension there with some people who've had the vaccine and others who are sort of, standing back?
There are people that are in there that, I was just reading on social media, there was a bit of a rally in Rotorua. There were some from Murupara that were actually going to it. So I do know, because the whole thing's not mandatory, people are, I'm trying the very best that I can do to advocate for them to be vaccinated.
Jackie, obviously there's a target. 90% double vaccinated is what the government would like to see. Do you reckon you guys are going to make it in Murupara?
I hope so. I did pose a question to my board members around, if the Delta virus is to hit Murupara, what's your plan? What's the plan? See, the problem with Murupara and the surrounding communities, or those that fall under the Galatea Murupara ward, they're actually spread out. So, for instance, for a community like Ruatahuna, it takes them 1 hour and 45 minutes to get to Rotorua, to the nearest hospital. We do have clinics inside Ruatahuna, Minginui and Te Whai and Murupara. But, if it was that serious, I just posed that question. What is your plan? And, And what if there were lots of people that needed to go in? Because we're talking about families that are vulnerable. These are vulnerable families. These are families that probably even need a ride to get to town. Those kind of things.
Thank you so much for your kōrero this evening, Jackie. That is Jackie Te Amo, who is from the Murupara Community Board. She's the chair, actually, helping encourage people to get vaccinated in her area. The skyrocketing number of children living in motels is being called a moral failure by the National Party. There was an increase of 280 tamariki in motels in the 3 months to September. Now, more than 4,500 kids are growing up in emergency housing. National says it's a horrifying state of affairs, but the government says it's a problem that began before they were in power. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Emergency housing grants were supposed to be a short-term solution to stop families staying in cars. Introduced by the national government back in 2016, 5 years on, motels now house thousands of families who have nowhere else to go. Ange Tapania is the kaiarahi of Te Tai Tokoro Housing Trust, where she says efforts to shift families from crisis to confidence are being tested.
With the state of play in the housing environment at present, even our own confidence in a better future for whānau is, rapidly diminishing at this moment, and that the realities of whānau securing permanent housing is looking pretty bleak out there.
The Trust manages short-term transitional homes across Whangarei, but over the past year, demand has far exceeded supply.
We had 266 inquiries for housing through our organisation, and in that same period we only had the capacity to take on 56 households.
Some of the families approaching Te Tai Tokoro Housing Trust are looking to get out of overcrowded households, cars or motels where they may have been placed by the Ministry for Social Development. National's housing spokesperson Nicola Willis says the fact so many people are being squeezed out of the private market is due to government failures.
They can't afford the rent in a private rental, and so they end up in arrears and then they end up in emergency housing. It's imperative that the government stop putting pressure on those rents through things like increasing taxes on landlords. That has an obvious flow-through effect.
There were 4,512 children in motels at the end of September. Nicola Willis says it's vital they're provided with the homes they need.
These are the children that are our most vulnerable children. And if we are to have any hope for them, we need them to be going to school, having some sort of routine, having some sort of regular access to medical professionals and to others. How can we give that to them if they are in a motel room? This is an absolute moral failure, and it is an indictment on a government that promised to solve the housing crisis.
But that's being wholeheartedly rejected by Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni.
Well, the moral failure is really they can take some responsibility for, and that is not building houses in the first place. I mean, the reality is, and this is the truth, the emergency housing accommodation policy started under the previous national government. It was a response and had to be done when publicly it was recognised there were large numbers of families, including children, sleeping in cars and homeless.
Right now, some towns like Whangarei are running out of room to place families in need, with available motels all full. Carmel Sepuloni says work is being done to make sure those families are looked after.
It is one of the places across the country where there is generally a shortage of emergency housing accommodation options anyway. Some places this is not an issue, but there are a few.
There are currently 24,474 people on the public housing waitlist.
It's 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pitapita kōrero. After the news at 6, the New Zealand technology that could test your COVID immunity and let you know if you need a booster, all in a matter of minutes. Auckland Retail stores should be able to reopen next week if Cabinet gives a final sign-off next Monday. That'll be a move to Alert Level 3, Step 2 in Auckland. In an open letter to the Prime Minister, a collective of Auckland business associations have called for an immediate move to Alert Level 3, Step 3. Now, that would allow retailers, hospitality and close contact businesses like hairdressers to open to face-to-face customers with some safety guidelines. Well, joining me now is Viv Beck from Heart of the City, one of the 5 organisations who signed the letter. Viv, this is halfway to where you wanted to be and it's still another week away, so how do you feel about it?
Oh, disappointed. Yes, I thought they would be cautious with the numbers that we were seeing, although the vaccination rates are certainly tracking up, which is great. I thought they'd be cautious, but I really hope they'd go to level 2 tonight, and my colleagues, I think, will be in a very similar position.
Okay, so if it does happen and gets the final sign-off next week, how much better off are retailers with that scenario?
Well, it's still pretty tough, and I can speak for the city centre to say that level 3 is still about 85% down. So it'll be positive, and it's positive to be moving, but it's still going to be pretty tough with only retail and a lot of people work from home and not having hospitality and other businesses open. So it will still be pretty tough going, but it's moving in the right direction at least.
Do you think people will actually want to come to the shops?
Well, it's interesting. In previous occasions when we've got to level 1, people do love to come out, and we're certainly looking forward to those days again, but I think it'll be mixed. I think particularly with sort of the signals, at the end of the day, I think the vaccination rates are going up, and one of the issues that I can see is that even when we get to the prize of red is not actually such a great prize when they say that people are encouraged to work from home. And that does send a bit of a signal that, you really should still be staying home. And I don't understand that one. I'm probing that one again because 90% vaccination, people should be able to be out and at work. But the reality is it will be a little bit mixed. I think there'll be some people dying to get out. I know a lot of people are, but there'll be others who'll be more cautious. But I think... Sorry.
Viv, are shops ready to manage this from a safety point of view? And when I say shops, you've got a big mall down near the waterfront in Auckland. I mean, how's that going to work with people coming and going, using toilet facilities? And we've been told to stay away from each other, not share the bathroom and all the rest of it. So how are you going to manage it all?
Well, I know that retailers have had, all of our businesses that are customer-facing have had 18 months of this now, so they're very used to following protocols, and they don't want to be in lockdown. So people will be very determined to follow all of the guidelines, and bearing in mind now that the thing that's different is that the vaccination rates are getting up. And so that will certainly make a difference. But people will do what they're asked to do. We've seen that every time we've been in lockdown and restrictions come off, that people do tend to follow those rules because they don't want to be in lockdown. And I think with growing vaccination rates, the comfort is certainly going up. And I know a lot of businesses are saying to us that they feel very comfortable that they can meet the safety requirements. And I think it'll be just up to the customers as to how they feel, and some people will be more cautious, but other people will be very keen to get going again. But we're all used to it. People are wearing masks, doing a whole lot of things we would never have done before, but people recognise that this environment's different and we need to follow those safety guidelines. But the most important thing is we want to see people get moving and the balance between the health and the economic response, because every day counts for these businesses. Another week will make a big difference to many people and not in a good way. So we're very mindful of that, and we do want to see that balance in the approach.
Good to talk to you, Viv. That's Viv Beck from the heart of the city. Dozens of people have turned out for the first day of a Farmgate Vaccination Tour of Southland. 2 mayors from the region have teamed up to tow teams of vaccinators in caravans to remote settlements throughout the week. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown hit the road with them and filed this story.
Vaccination rates around the southern DHB are high, with about 90% having had a first dose. But there are pockets in the region where rates remain low, particularly the rural districts of Southland and Gore. When the pop-up clinic in the car park of the Croydon Aviation Museum in Mandeville opened at 10 a.m, there was already one person waiting. Gore District Mayor Tracy Hicks says every single dose counts.
It's really encouraging, and it's great that people are turning out. And look, this is not about volumes, as you say. This is about getting those people that, for whatever reason, just haven't been able to get it, making it more accessible to them, and it seems to be working, so fantastic.
16 people, including half a dozen receiving their first dose, got their shots at the 2-hour Mandeville clinic. Among them was Donna McGaughey, who, after being hesitant to receive the vaccine, decided to take some time off work and get her first shot along with her husband.
I've just sort of been putting it off for a while, not sure whether I should, and then I thought, why not? I've got young kids, and I thought I need to get it for them. Well, both me and my husband were going to get it. So, yeah, we thought we may as well just come down, pop up, rather than having to book them with the doctor and that kind of thing. We thought this would be an easier option.
She says misinformation on social media, as well as the government's push for people to get the shot, had initially put her off.
It was getting pushed so hard that you sort of went the other way with it. We went, why are they pushing it so hard, and then I thought, why not? I got the flu vaccine when I was pregnant because it was recommended. So, I didn't look into that too much. So why am I looking into this, so much when it's recommended?
A steady stream of people also made their way through clinics at Wrights Bush, Fairfax and Belfer. Bronwyn Brown took some time out of tail painting heifers to pop down the hill to the clinic at Fairfax.
I'm here to support the community. We need to get behind this and keep COVID under control so we can go back to normal.
Southland District Mayor Gary Tong is pleased with the number of young people coming to get their first dose.
Whether it was 1 or 100 that we saw today, it was progress, but I'm really stoked with the progress we're having. Like there's a line up here now, people waiting, so it's great.
He says the comments from those attending the clinics prove the low numbers in the districts are about access to vaccines.
It was access and their workloads. Like one young chap this morning, he got off the tractor literally, came down, got dosed and then back on the tractor. So they just had to do it. You know, they took that 20 minutes, half hour out of their day and they've been vaccinated and they'll be back for the second one. So it's fantastic.
The week-long tour continues tomorrow with stops in Waikaka, Wyndham, Centre Bush and Dipton.
In breaking news, the Tongan government has announced a one-week lockdown starting at midnight tonight. It comes after the kingdom's first positive case of COVID-19 on Friday. The fully vaccinated missionary worker had travelled from Christchurch on a repatriation flight last Wednesday. All domestic travel in Tonga has stopped and only essential services will remain open over the week. The Black Caps have secured a bounce-back win that keeps their T20 hopes alive in Dubai. New Zealand joined Pakistan as front-runners to advance from their group into the World Cup semi-finals after a thumping 8-wicket win over pre-tournament favourites India in Dubai this morning. The one-sided result has also caused plenty of hand-wringing in cricket. Crazy India. Clay Wilson has more.
Hugely impressive victory for New Zealand tonight.
Hugely impressive and hugely important. The Black Caps came into this morning's crunch clash with India knowing both teams' title hopes were all but on the line. And with the pressure on, against the star-studded pre-tournament favourites, New Zealand delivered in dominant fashion, much to the satisfaction of Black Caps captain Kane Williamson.
Anytime you play India is always a very tough task, and today, really proud of our all-round performance, and a lot of planning goes into it, but you still know you're coming up against the best.
New Zealand chased their modest target of 111 with more than 5 overs to spare. But it was the Black Caps bowlers who most impressed coach Gary Stead.
Up there with the best performance I've seen in my time with a T20 bowling team. To restrict, a star-studded team like India to 110 was really, really special. And then I thought the batting was very clinical.
Leading the way was Ish Sodhi, who celebrated his 29th birthday with a player of the match performance. But the leg spinner was quick to deflect credit, making special mention of Daryl Mitchell, whose 49 runs from 35 balls was the key factor in the successful chase.
It was his second game opening the batting in 2020 professional cricket, and he's facing one of the best bowling attacks in the world. So it's a huge testament to his character, and also I think the backing that he's receiving from our camp. And there was never going to be an easy chase. They were always going to come out and be really aggressive with the ball. The way that he played that game was definitely the icing on the cake.
It's the third time in recent memory New Zealand has either ended or dealt a sizable blow to Indian title aspirations. And following on from that 2019 One-Day World Cup semi-final and this year's World Test Championship final, this latest result has left plenty of questions from former players and millions of fans alike. But Indian legends such as Virender Sehwag and VVS Laxman were also quick to credit the Black Caps, who can now reach the semis with wins over Scotland, Namibia and Afghanistan. They'll be favourites to win all 3 matches, but Stead isn't writing off the minnows.
One person can change the game in T20, and we certainly won't be taking any team for granted. No doubt Afghanistan are a team who will upset other teams as well. As you saw with Pakistan, they nearly got over the line with them, so they got some quality players.
And potential complacency isn't the only reason the Black Caps need to keep their foot on the gas. The semi-final spots could still come down to net run rate, and Stead says they'll be keeping an eye on all the calculations.
Stand by for high levels of cuteness. The Wellington cable car has opened its doors for dogs to take in the view of the capital on a good day. A month-long trial started today to let people bring their canine friends on board. And how well they behave will determine if it carries on. Our reporter Jake McKee and cameraman Angus Drever went to see what everyone's barking about.
Forget a walk around the block. The cable car could be the future for Wellingtonians and their dogs. From today, people have been able to bring their pooches on board for the ride. Wellington Cable Car Chief Executive Cesar Piotto says it's something people have been asking about for a long time.
When we were really busy with cruise ships and international tourists, there wasn't an opportunity. But now that there is, we're really keen to trial it and see how it goes.
He hopes it's a howling success and that it makes it easier for people to take their dogs up to the Botanic Gardens or down to the waterfront.
So whether it's before work, whether it's after work, whether it's on a lunch break, it's going to allow people to really just pop up, go for a quick walk with their dogs and even go back to work or, when they finish, especially now that the days are a little bit longer.
Dog owner Mary Kate O'Connor went for a ride with her dogs Jess and May and says it's a great way to get around the city.
Just being able to get straight down from the hill straight into the city and then to go out around the waterfront will be good.
She wants people to see that dogs can be well behaved, their bark bigger than their bite.
Lots of people are quite nervous about dogs, and so that's often a consideration. But you have to take that into account as an owner.
Cesar Piotto says there are rules. Dogs have to be trained and be on a lead. Those rules being followed is critical to the success of the trial.
We're also looking to make sure that it doesn't impact our other passengers. So whether they're not really comfortable around dogs or whether they have allergies. So we've separated the car into two parts. One side for where the dogs can travel and the other side for passengers that perhaps don't want to be around the dogs.
It'll cost $2 to take your dog on board, and the dog ticket sales during the month-long trial are being donated to the SPCA. If the trial's successful, the ticket costs will go towards keeping a stock of doggy disaster kits around.
It's slightly different to picking up after your dog on the park, because in the park you just put it in a bag and you find the closest rubbish bin. Whereas here we do need to disinfect, we need to wipe it down and just clean it up. So there's a bit more work involved.
A decision on permanently letting puppies perch here for a ride should be made by early next month, as long as they don't drive everyone barking mad.
Oh, you've got to check that video out from Jake and Angus. It'll be up on our Facebook page. On the interview with Chris Hipkins, this person says, why can't Chris Hipkins give a date on when people can leave Auckland? It's inhumane that families can't be together in the same country. If you're double vaccinated and have been tested, what reasons can there be that you can't travel outside of Auckland? That from Claire. And this person says, why doesn't he make a decision about schools? My kids are 14, 13 and 10. They're sad that they're not there. They've lost motivation for learning.
RNZ News, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Marama Tipole. Aucklanders will have to live with their current COVID restrictions for at least 8 more days. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says Cabinet has decided in principle to move Auckland to Alert Level 3 Step 2 at 11:59pm next Tuesday. It means shops, museums and libraries in Auckland can reopen with mask wearing and social distancing, and the outdoor gathering limit will be increased to 25. COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins says the announcement is a sign of confidence in how the outbreak is panning out. He told Checkpoint the low number of people in hospital or ICU with the virus is one of the factors Cabinet is considering, but the final decision will depend on how cases develop in the next week.
We've still got to see flow through is what the impact of secondary schools reopening is, so we can work our way through that. But yes, we are feeling more confident, and that is one of the reasons that we've signalled that we want to move from next week.
Meanwhile, Waikato can move to Alert Level 3, Step 2 at midnight tomorrow. An increasing proportion of new COVID-19 cases in the Delta outbreak are Māori. The Director-General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says Māori represented just 10% of cases at the start of the outbreak, but that's jumped to 50% now.
We've seen an increasing proportion of cases that are Māori. It was less than 10% of cases initially in August, but is between 40 and 50% of new cases each day now.
Ashley Bloomfield says at the same time the number of Pasifika catching COVID-19 since the outbreak started has dropped. COVID-19 has been detected in Christchurch's wastewater, but Dr Bloomfield says there's a low risk of undetected community transmission in the city. 2 positive samples were collected on Friday in the southern and eastern parts of the city. Further samples are being taken, with results expected later in the week. Dr Bloomfield says testing rates have been high and there are probable explanations for wastewater detections. And in breaking news, it's just been announced that Tonga, which got its first COVID case last week, is going into lockdown at midnight. We'll have more news on this in our next bulletin. All unvaccinated staff at the South Island's largest port were temporarily stood down on full pay this morning. The deadline for border workers to be vaccinated passed on Saturday. The Littleton Port Company says the move is temporary while a risk assessment is done and more information is gathered on the vaccination status of staff. It says the decision is based on limiting the health and safety risks to staff and the supply chain. More than 95% of the company's border-facing staff are vaccinated. GPs and nurse practitioners are encouraged to use a free COVID-19 conversation program to reach patients with doubts on vaccination. The program has been extended for 2 more weeks to include nurse practitioners after a successful pilot. Last month, more than 1,000 people decided to get vaccinated after GPs called them to discuss any concerns they had. Sarah Hartnell was the clinical lead at the Northern Region Health Coordination Centre, which is funding the program. She says the target is Māori and Pacific people over the age of 12 who haven't had their first dose.
We recognise that primary care is doing an amazing job, and this is just another tool that they have to be able to reach out to the people they haven't been able to reach so far.
Southern Field Days is the latest event to have the plug pulled because of COVID-19. It'll be the first time in 40 years the event has been cancelled. It had been due to be held in Waimumu in February. The popular Lake Coleridge fishing competition, normally held on the first Saturday in November, has also been postponed. It's hoped to hold the event once restrictions are relaxed. It's 4 minutes past 6. New Zealand football say they've told all players in contention for the All Whites they risk missing selection if they're unvaccinated against COVID-19. It was revealed at the weekend a player was not selected for matches in Abu Dhabi this month because they were unvaccinated. New Zealand football say they won't be releasing the vaccination status of individual players, but confirm all of the squad named today have been vaccinated. Elliot Collier, Jamie Searle and Francis de Vries are the 3 uncapped players in the squad for the games against Gambia and are yet to be in the confirmed side. The Black Ferns captain Les Elder says there are positives to take from the first test against England into next week's second test in Northampton. The side were beaten 43-12 this morning, the heaviest defeat in their history. Despite the result, Elder says it wasn't all bad news.
We got to get 9 new girls introduced to Test match rugby, and it is a whole new level. So all those girls got to experience that. There were areas of the game where we did find some opportunity there, but already I can see that the girls are pretty hungry for it.
Two-time champion Michael Vink has made a major claim for a third title on Stage 2 of cycling's Tour of Southland. The Cantabrian has a 12-second lead after winning today's challenging 172-kilometre stage from Invercargill to Lumsden. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we talk to author Julie Glamazina about her latest book, Spies and Lies, The Mysterious Dr. Danville, and we'll find out who the doctor is. Raymond Sangapula-Tele joins us once again from South Auckland, and our sportscaster is LA Times' Helene Elliott, giving us her take on how vaccine passports are opening up sporting events in the US. That's Nights with me, Yara Nassor, coming up after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday for Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Long fine spells, strong southeasterlies tomorrow night. Gisborne to Wairarapa, partly cloudy with isolated showers. Rain in Gisborne tomorrow evening. Central High Country and Whanganui to Wellington, showers lingering about the ranges. A few afternoon showers tomorrow, persisting in Wellington with strong southeasterlies. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine with cloud increasing tomorrow and showers expected from late morning. Bullard to Fjord and a few showers clearing to fine south of Westport tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland and cloudy periods, a few showers about coastal Southland, spreading elsewhere this evening and clearing tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, partly cloudy with the odd shower and fine apart from evening showers tomorrow. It's 6 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e hoa, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A New Zealand-based biotech company wants to start mass-producing a device which can tell you whether or not you need a COVID booster shot. Orbis ultimately wants to see its lab-in-a-box available in pharmacies, airports and workplaces around the country by the end of the year. And as the national conversation turns to COVID booster shots, the company says ARCA could become a valuable tool in determining who needs a third dose of the vaccine. Matthew Tunison reports.
These Aucklanders on the streets of Ellerslie today are all vaccinated, but do they need a booster shot?
So I got my vaccine 2 weeks ago, and supposedly I've got peak immunity, but I think being able to check that in a pharmacy would be a good idea.
I put a thing on Facebook that said hurry up and buy the boosters.
Professor David Williams, who's one of the scientific founders of Orbis, came up with the idea for the device called ARCA. He believes it could have big implications for the fight against COVID-19 and could be used at airports to test people's immunity to the virus.
So you're going travelling, you want to perhaps assess for yourself your risk in relation to where you're going. So you can get an estimate of, you measure your antibodies and there's an estimate of your risk of catching COVID. I think that empowers people. Other things are like corporate situations or workers at the border. The test is so easy that you could do it every month. If you're a corporate, you're concerned about the safety of your employees, maybe you'd want to, offer this test to them, just so that you know that your workforce is protected.
Preliminary trials have yielded very positive results, both in terms of accuracy and how easy it is to use. To see how it works, the Orbis team kindly agreed to test me and my colleague Ella Stewart. We headed to a GP clinic in Auckland's Papatoetoe, where Dr. Api Talimaitonga and his team took blood samples with a finger prick device like those used in diabetes tests.
So if you put your finger down against there,
Okay.
and you go 1, 2, 3.
I literally didn't feel that. I had my second shot of Pfizer on the 6th of October, a little over 3 weeks before I had the immunity test. So, in theory, I should be at just about peak protection against COVID right now. Ella lives with a frontline worker, so was vaccinated early on in the rollout, about 5.5 months ago. What's the theory with Ella's? What are we thinking? It could be starting to wane by now?
Yeah, I mean, the evidence from overseas is it's about 6 months that it begins to wane, and the evidence is, from Israel and the UK, they're beginning to offer boosters.
Right.
I quite like my booster.
Yeah.
I'd really like to get it now. But I'm not immunocompromised or anything, so I don't think I'll be first in line.
The team then took our blood samples to their lab in Penrose and fed them through the ARCA machine. It's a fully automated process, and before we could say immunoglobulin, Dr. Api called.
Your result shows you've got a high immune response.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So it's a good level, and it goes along with you having had your second jab, early October.
Yeah.
So as you know, the literature says that it's 2 weeks after the second jab when you get that maximum immune response and antibody level.
Now, what about Ella?
Okay, so Ella, as you know, she had her first and second jabs in May this year. So that's getting up to 6 months. Her response has come back at the median level.
Right.
So not low, and as the machine just goes low, medium, and high, you're high, hers is medium. And so it shows that she's still protected to COVID, and a medium response is still good, but it kind of would be important or would make sense that if she gets tested again in a few months, if it's beginning to go into the low, it hopefully will be a recommendation for her to get a booster shot.
Orbis is working with Sir Ian Taylor, who this afternoon left New Zealand on one of the first quarantine-free trips overseas since the start of the pandemic. The Orbis device is among a suite of technologies that he'll be testing during his trip, which will see him self-isolating for 2 weeks on his return from Los Angeles. So would Aucklanders pay to check their immunity?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. I think for me it would definitely give a reassurance to know that, my body's still able to, resist the virus.
Orbis has just completed a trial with Air New Zealand staff to assess whether they may be in need of booster jabs. It hopes it can start manufacturing the devices by the end of the year.
Aucklanders, the countdown is on. Cabinet ministers have made an in-principle decision to move the city down to Step 2 of the Alert Level 3 roadmap next week. The shift would see retail shops and public facilities open for the first time in 12 weeks, while the limit for outdoor gatherings will rise to 25. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says Cabinet weighed up rising vaccination rates and the stress of living in lockdown for 76 days.
These decisions are carefully balanced and allow us to release some of the pressure and fatigue that we know exists in Auckland, while we continue to vaccinate and prepare for the new framework where much more certainty will exist for everyone.
Te Peramia also announced that parts of Waikato in Alert Level 3 will move to Step 2 from midnight tomorrow. New modelling is also being released that shows while case numbers in the Delta outbreak are rising, hospitalisation rates aren't climbing at the same rate. Director General of Health, Dr Ashley Bloomfield, says on current projections, the country's ICUs won't be overwhelmed. However, he says the makeup of the cases has shifted and Māori are now overrepresented in new cases.
Of concern in the current numbers is that we've seen an increasing proportion of cases that are Māori. It was less than 10% of cases initially in August, but is between 40 and 50% of new cases each day now. Likewise, in counterpoint to that, the high number of Pacifica cases at the outset of the outbreak has now dropped down.
75% of the eligible population is now double vaccinated, while Auckland has already hit 80%. Tamaki Makaurau is now just 5,000 first doses away from cracking 90% single-dosed. So the parts of Waikato in Alert Level 3 will move to Step 2 tomorrow night. Our reporter Andrew McRae went to see how that's gone down.
A sigh of relief from retailers. Vanessa Williams from the Hamilton Central Business Association says shop owners are rearing to go after what's been a long, bleak wait, and she's expecting customers will return in droves.
I think people who are double vaccinated will feel secure to be coming out, and we still do have a limited amount of cases. They are all tending to be linked, so I think as long as the appropriate protocols are observed, that people should be quite comfortable to come in.
Hamilton's Mayor Paula Southgate is welcoming the easing of restrictions. She says the gradual opening up couldn't have come sooner as the public mood is changing.
We're coming up to Christmas. People are losing confidence and optimism about the future because they just don't understand where we're tracking. They don't see the milestones. It's like running across country when you don't know exactly how many miles you're covering off. It's hard work.
The Mayor of Waitomo, John Robertson, is desperate to get out of Level 3 completely, saying businesses are struggling for no real reason.
For Waitomo to stay in Level 3 when we've had no cases, when at the same time we're seeing other areas like in New Zealand, like Northland and Christchurch, that have cases and are in Level 2, it just seems that the policy is not being implemented in a consistent and fair way.
There was one new case in Ngaruawahia today. This falls in the Waikato district boundary, headed by Mayor Alan Sanson. He's happier than he was before today's announcement.
To move us to a 3.2, which I understand, I think that is a big plus, especially leading up to Christmas. If you want to kill our economy, leave it as it is, because that'll certainly kill it.
He reckons decision makers have been slow to understand the mental stress of being in lockdown. Hamilton currently has the highest vaccination rates in the Waikato DHB region at 74.6% fully vaccinated. Paula Southgate says the time is fast approaching for Hamilton to be viewed separately from other parts of Waikato and King Country.
It is a big population, and I do think we're worthy of specific focus.
Paula Southgate expects some people will still be so fed up with any alert level 3 restrictions, they'll choose not to follow the rules too closely.
And some feedback on the level decision. This listener says, good decision. It's an obvious difference to move around shops with a mask on compared to sitting for a period of time with people in one place, a home. I'm pleased they're considering everything and not just case numbers. Marion's got in touch to say, I expected all efforts would have been made to have vaccination forums, as the speaker from Murupara would like to have. It is critical that everything is done to increase vaccination rates as fast and as much as possible over the whole country. Thank you for your feedback. It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A Māori activist has called out the host and other developed countries at a massive UN climate conference for reaping massive profits while the world burns. RNZ's climate reporter Hamish Cardwell has been following local and offshore reactions to the first day of COP26.
Now, upon my special invitation, it is my pleasure to invite India Logan Riley, a representative of the Indigenous peoples, to address the plenary.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Hello everyone. Ko kahuraniki, te maunga, ko toki te awa.
COP26 President Alok Sharma inviting young Māori climate activist India Logan Riley to address the global audience at the Climate Summit. It was a last-minute call-up, but India's been to lots of these huge international meetings, and having to repeat the same message time and again is deeply frustrating.
6 years ago, I first spoke these stories into this space, and every year since, I have repeated the same words: wildfires, sea level rise, wildfires, suffering, sea level rise, biodiversity loss, sea level rise. Emissions continue to rise.
Speaking to RNZ afterwards, India Logan Riley said colonialism is to blame for much of the damage the changing climate will bring. India used the platform to call out developed countries for reaping the benefits of fossil fuels while Indigenous people bear the costs.
I was very clear that I didn't want to be tokenised or be seen as an Indigenous person just there to give nice words to make people feel good, because especially the fraught relationship between Māori and the British Crown and COP being hosted by the British government.
The Pacific is among the first to face the devastating effects of climate change from sea level rise. Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown says Pacific leaders are getting sick and tired of repeating themselves on the world stage.
Our messaging hasn't changed from COP to COP, it's the same. We now need these countries to demonstrate how they're going to make these commitments to us, because things are just getting worse and worse in terms of the impacts of climate change.
COVID-19 travel restrictions and quarantine requirements prevent many of the region's leaders from attending COP. Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown says Pacific leaders are being forced to vote by proxy and should have been allowed to cast ballots virtually.
At this late stage, for a very important meeting which heavily impacts Pacific countries, to be denied a voice unless we're there in person is verging on hypocrisy.
The two-day World Leaders Summit kicks off late tonight New Zealand time. Expect to see a flurry of countries pledged to do more to cut emissions. New Zealand yesterday promised to halve climate gases by 2030. But to hit the target, it will need to buy reductions from other countries, and is eyeing developing nations in the Asia-Pacific region. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says it is still the government's top priority to reduce domestic emissions.
But of course then, over and above that, what you're unable to achieve domestically, yes, then you make a commitment to see that offset elsewhere. But our first and foremost, the incentive and priority now is domestic.
The country's negotiators will spend the week in staggeringly complicated negotiations, with the goal of trying to limit warming to 1.5 degrees before the politicians step in next week and make decisions. COP26 host and UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the world's fate is in their hands.
If Glasgow fails, then the whole thing fails.
COP26 is set to last 2 weeks.
Just an update on a couple of earlier stories. Let's start with MIQ. There was a couple of people who did a runner from MIQ over the weekend. This from the police. The man who absconded from the Jet Park managed quarantine facility on Saturday was located today during a vehicle stop in West Auckland. He's been transported by police wearing PPE to an MIQ facility. The whereabouts of the woman who also absconded is known to police. However, health officials have advised that she is not required to return to MIQ. Police continue to investigate this matter and a decision around any charges will be made in due course, say the police. And obviously there's this big fire in Bromley. In Christchurch. Now, fire and emergency say they're continuing to work on the fire at the Christchurch wastewater treatment plant in Bromley. They were initially called at 3:07 this afternoon. At its peak, there was nearly 50 firefighters working on the fire and some crew have now been released. The fire is now contained but remains active and fire and emergency is expecting to remain on the site all night. Now, there is smoke drifting across the city and the Canterbury District Health Board is advising people affected by the smoke to stay indoors and keep doors and windows closed. The smoke is expected to linger for the next few hours. A toxicology professor says consumers are easily hoodwinked by marketing for natural health supplements, which he believes should be subjected to toxicology testing before sale. Experts are warning natural health products can be dangerous as sales of the products have risen along with COVID cases. Naomi Arnold has been listening to people who have had reactions to supplements.
I got a really severe burning all over my face, which then peeled off.
I started experiencing periods of shortness of breath, dizziness and near fainting.
All my organs felt like they were swollen for probably about 5 or 6 days, like they were too big for my body.
RNZ spoke to half a dozen people who had worrying reactions after taking natural health supplements. They ranged from facial skin peeling off to heart problems and 2 cases of anaphylaxis, one requiring a tracheotomy and intensive care. More than half of New Zealanders use supplements and herbal medicines regularly. But many also assume natural means safe, and experts say that's not true. Natural health supplements are regulated under food legislation at the moment, so despite being sold in pharmacies, they're not legislated or tested as medicines. But University of Canterbury toxicology professor Ian Shaw says they're still marketed to consumers with a medical aura that can be misleading.
This seems to have been over the last 4, 5, 6, 7, could be 8, 9, 10 years. A quite definite move from the dietary supplement companies to push very close to the line of making medicinal claims for their products. And they will employ lawyers to look very closely at the regulation so that they can make a statement that isn't tantamount to a medicinal claim, but is so close to it that it makes their materials look like medicines.
Professor Shaw thinks such products should be subject to toxicological evaluation, like pharmaceuticals. Natural remedies expert Dr. Sean Holt doesn't think there are good systems in place to capture the potential harms from the products.
Unfortunately, a lot of the alternative medicine world is very much anti-scientific. It's based on touchy-feely stories and anecdotes and not hard science. I think like anything you're going to treat yourself with, you should be well educated, you should take advice from your doctor. If something's too good to be true or sounds like it probably is, and there's nothing that can't give you side effects, it can give you positive effects.
New Zealand Medical Association Chair Alistair Humphrey says part of the problem with the industry being a black hole of regulation is that people are embarrassed to bring up their supplement use with their GP, because some doctors may dismiss them too readily.
As GPs, we are well aware that people will try all sorts of things with various conditions. I think it's important for both the general public and doctors to understand that this is going to happen and that we need to be open and honest about it with each other.
Both the natural health products industry and medical professionals have been calling for better regulations for years, but the Ministry of Health says planned new legislation has been delayed due to the pandemic. In the meantime, industry body Natural Health Products NZ says people should talk to their health professional before taking any natural product and always take them as directed.
Wellington Airport has welcomed an electrifying new visitor, an entirely electric two-seat light aircraft. Owned and flown by Christchurch-based Electric Air, undertook the longest ever pure electric flight over water this morning. It flew from Ormaka near Blenheim across Cook Strait and into the capital city airport. The aircraft is a step into the future of electrifying air travel and training. Visual journalist Samuel Ralstone went to see what's got everyone so charged up.
The little plane that could. Electric Air's eco-friendly aircraft leading the charge on sustainability as it touches down in Wellington. As with most electric transport, the aircraft is a sleek, minimalist design and almost alarmingly small. Island hopping from north to south, founder and CEO of Electric Air, Gary Friedman, says the Cook Strait holds a lot of significance for the record-breaking voyage.
The Cook Strait is symbolic in New Zealand, obviously, and so to fly across it in an electric plane 101 years after the first guy did it just means a lot, and we were delighted to see land today.
Unlike many landings in the capital, Friedman says the flight was smooth despite a bit of cloud coming out of Blenheim.
The last 10 miles, I was just loving it. You can see the coast, start seeing Wellington. It's a beautiful city, and then the airport's never looked so good. Never seen me so pleased to see a runway.
Launched a year ago, Electric Air is based in Christchurch and says it can replace 90% of the emissions from standard flight training. Most standard training flights are about an hour, which is the upper limit of the battery life of the plane. Conveniently, it also only takes an hour to charge the battery. The record-breaking flight coincides with the first day of the COP26 Climate Change Summit in Glasgow, something Friedman says was a motivating factor for the flight this morning.
It's time for action, and there's no greater message that we could think of than flying across the Cook Strait in an electric plane, say there are different ways.
Head of Operations at Wellington Airport, Matthew Palliser, says aviation is working to become more sustainable.
Already started some of the work with Sounds Air, partnering with them. We've got some exciting stuff on the horizon. Their first electric flights, 2026.
But sustainability doesn't stop at the runway in the capital. Sustainability Manager at Wellington Airport, Chris Fidel, says multiple initiatives are in the works to make the pre- and post-flight environment more eco-friendly.
We're looking at creating a circular food economy. So we're investing with For the Better Good, a local partner, to create a garden on Bridge Street, whereby compostable food waste will go into the garden, and also vendors at the airport will receive food produced from that garden. So creating a bit of a circle.
The electric plane will remain in the capital for the rest of the week, for those who wish to see the beginning of a sustainable future for air travel.
Oh my goodness me, you need to check that thing out online, that story from Samuel Ralstone. It looks like a galloping peanut in the sky. They must have a weight limit. I mean, how heavy can the people be on that thing? I'd be scared. Looks interesting though. The video will go up on our Facebook page. Some more of your feedback before we head off. On the level decision, this person says, I think the government's acting responsibly, unlike most other regimes that put profits before people. That from Alec. Debbie says, I find it hard to believe many Aucklanders will be pleased with today's announcement to confirm next week that Auckland will go to level 3, step 2. Placate with a possible easing, but not till next week, and then it will be that level for 2 to 3 weeks before maybe level 3, step 3. For goodness sake, says Debbie, stop playing with people's lives. And this one, never mind when Aucklanders are going to be able to leave, when a fully vaccinated Northland is going to be able to travel to the rest of the country without paying Air New Zealand extortionate fares, says Leslie. Thanks for getting in touch. That's all we've got time for. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi o Pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. on First Up. They speak to a mall operator about what shopping and security might look like when, fingers crossed for some, the doors are finally flung open next week. Have a great evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, told Checkpoint the low number of people in hospital or ICU with the virus has given them confidence to relax restrictions in Auckland next week. The Auckland Mayor, Phil Goff, has welcomed the decision, but reminded people in the city they must abide by the current restrictions in order to step down next week. The Tonga government will put the main island, Tongatapu, into lockdown from tonight following the kingdom's first COVID-19 case. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
I hesitate to tweak your intro, but my own word instead of extraordinary would be exquisite.
excruciating. Absolutely excruciating.
Live with local, national and international stories and some music with your news.
I know that this song is a romantic cowboy ballad sung by a narrator whose body is devastated by environmental destruction.